بمناسبة اليوم العالمي عذرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني ويشرفني أن أفتتح معكم اليوم هذه الندوة التربوية المتميزة التي ينظمها المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي بمناسبة اليوم العالمي للإبداع والابتكار، والتي تحمل عنوانا يعكس جوهر المرحلة التي نعيشها وتحدياتها المتسارعة. المدارس مبتكرة تجديد التعليم من خلال الإبداع والابتكار. نرحب بكم جميعا شركاء المعرفة والتخطيط والتطوير من وزارات التربية والتعليم ومؤسسات الأكاديمية والخبراء والباحثين والمعلمين، ونعبر عن امتناننا لمشاركتكم في هذا الحراك في هذه الندوة التربوية. إن واقع التعليم في عالم اليوم يفرض علينا جميعا أن نعيد النظر جذريا في بناء مدارسنا وتصميم مناهجنا وتشكيل علاقاتنا التربوية، إذ لم تعد النماذج التقليدية في التعليم قادرة على مواكبة تسارع التحولات التكنولوجية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية، ولا على إعداد أجيال تمتلك الأدوات والمرونة اللازمة للتفاعل مع عالم يتغير باستمرار. فالقرن ال21 لم يعد يقيس جودة النظم التعليمية فقط بقدرتها على نقل المعرفة، بل بقدرتها على تمكين المتعلمين من الإبداع وحل المشكلات والتفكير النقدي والعمل الجماعي والابتكار في التعامل مع المجهول. وتشير التقارير الدولية إلى أن المهارات التي سيحتاجها الطلبة للنجاح في سوق العمل وفي الحياة تتغير بوتيرة غير مسبوقة. ففي تقرير المنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي لعام 2023 ورد أن أكثر من 50% من المهارات الأساسية المتداولة اليوم لن تبقى صالحة بحلول عام 2030، وأن أبرز المهارات التي ستفرض حضورها هي التفكير التحليلي والمرونة والتصميم الإبداعي والقيادة التشاركية. كما أشار تقرير اليونسكو حول مستقبل التربية والتعليم إلى أن تعزيز الإبداع في البيئات المدرسية يرفع من مستوى تفاعل الطلبة بنسبة تصل إلى 38%، ويزيد من معدلات تحصيلهم الدراسي بشكل ملحوظ، خاصة حين يتم ذلك من خلال مناهج مرنة وأساليب تعليمية نشطة ودمج مدروس للتكنولوجيا. وتبين الدراسات التربوية أن المدارس التي تطبق نماذج تعليمية مبتكرة تحقق أداء أعلى من نظيراتها التقليدية بنسبة تتراوح بين 20 إلى 30%، مؤشرات التفاعل الطلابي ومستوى الدافعية والقدرة على الربط بين التعلم والحياة الواقعية. وفقا لتقرير البنك الدولي، فإن التعليم القائم على المشروعات والأساليب التفاعلية يسهم في تقليل نسب التسرب المدرسي بنسب تصل إلى 25%، خاصة في البيئات ذات التحديات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية. وقد شهد وأشارت تقارير اليونسكو إلى أن ما يقارب 75% من المدارس في الدولة تقدم أنشطة منهجية ولا منهجية تعزز من مهارات الإبداع والتفكير التصميمي. ورغم كل الجهود التي تقوم بها الأنظمة التعليمية في الانتقال إلى تعليم مبتكر، يتطلب منا ما هو أكثر من إدخال أدوات رقمية أو إدراج مفردات جديدة في المناهج، بل يتطلب تحولات جذرية في بنية النظام التربوي ذاته، من السياسات إلى آليات التقييم، ومن إدارة المدرسة إلى ثقافة المجتمع المدرسي. فالمعلم لا يستطيع أن يبدع إذا لم يشعر بالأمان والدعم، والقيادة المدرسية لن تنجح في إدارة بيئة محفزة إذا كانت غارقة في أعباء إدارية وتقليدية. والسياسات التعليمية لن تنجح في ترسيخ الإبداع إذا لم تكن مرنة ومبنية على فهم عميق للتحولات الاجتماعية والثقافية والاقتصادية التي تعيشها المجتمعات. في هذا السياق يبرز الدور المحوري للمعلم باعتباره المصمم الأول لتجربة التعلم داخل الفصل. فالمعلم الذي يمتلك أدوات الإبداع ويتلقى تدريبا مهنيا مستمرا ويجد بيئة داعمة سيكون قادرا على تحويل الحصة الدراسية من نقل للمعلومة إلى مغامرة معرفية، من محتوى جامد إلى تجربة حية. قد بين منتدى السياسات التعليمية الثالث عشر التابع لليونسكو أن المعلمين الذين يمارسون أساليب تدريسية إبداعية يساهمون في تنمية مهارات التفكير العليا لدى طلابهم بمعدل يزيد عن 50% مقارنة بأساليب التدريس التقليدية. كما أن القيادة المدرسية تمثل أحد أهم محركات للتغيير الإبداعي، فالقادة التربويين الذين يتبنون فكرا استراتيجيا ويمنحون الثقة لفرقهم التعليمية ويسعون إلى بناء شراكات مجتمعية هم الأقدر على بناء بيئات مدرسية تتسم بالحيوية والابتكار. وتشير ممارسات دولية أن المدارس التي تعتمد على نموذج القيادة التشاركية تكون أكثر قدرة على تحقيق الاستدامة في ممارسات التعلم الإبداعي، وتتمتع بمعدلات أعلى في الرضا الوظيفي والمجتمعي. وفي ظل هذه المعطيات فإن نؤكد نحن هنا في المركز الإقليمي بالتزامنا على دعم السياسات التحولية والبرامج والمبادرات التحولية ودعم الأنظمة التعليمية لتنفيذ هذه المبادرات وتطوير القدرات البشرية القادرة على تطبيق مثل هذه النماذج. إن الاحتفاء بالإبداع والابتكار في التعليم لا ينبغي أن يظل مناسبة رمزية، بل يجب أن يتحول إلى رؤية مؤسسية وممارسة دائمة ومؤشر جودة يقاس ويتابع ويحتفى به. فكل فكرة جديدة في صف دراسي وكل مبادرة صغيرة من معلم شغوف وكل تغيير إيجابي في بيئة تعليمية يمكن أن يشكل بذرة لتحول أوسع في المجتمع بأكمله. ومن هذا المنطلق فإننا مدعون اليوم إلى نعيد التفكير في مدارسنا لا بوصفها أماكن لتلقين المعرفة، بل كمجتمعات تعلم حية تستثمر فيها الطاقات وتحرر العقول وتحتضن التنوع وتصنع مستقبلا أكثر استدامة وعدالة. وفي الختام لا يسعني أن أعبر عن فخري بهذا الجمع العلمي والتربوي الراقي، وعن إيماني بأن الحوار المشترك وتشارك المعرفة بين صناع السياسات والمعلمين والباحثين وقادة التعليم هو حجر الأساس لأي تحول تعليمي. إننا في المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي نؤمن أن الاستثمار في الإبداع التربوي هو استثمار في المستقبل ذاته، وأن كل فكرة مبتكرة اليوم هي خطوة نحو بناء تعليم القد الأفضل. أشكركم على مشاركتكم وتفاعلكم، وتطلع إلى ما ستثمر هذه الندوة به من حوارات وتوصيات ومعرفة تصب جميعها في صالح تعليم أكثر ابتكارا وأكثر إنسانية وأكثر قدرة على إلهام الأجيال القادمة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. والآن ننتقل إلى البروفيسورة الدكتورة كريستينا جنساكي، وهي المنسقة البحوث في مركز الابتكار التربوي في جامعة زايد، والتي سوف تدير هذه الندوة. والدكتورة كريستينا شغلت سابقا منصب كرسي اليونسكو في البحث التطبيقي في التعليم في دولة الإمارات، ولاحقا منصب العميد المساعد لبرنامج الأساسيات في كليات التقنية العليا في الدولة. وقبل قدومها إلى الإمارات عملت في جامعة كوينسلاند في استراليا، حيث قامت بتدريس معلمي المستقبل وأشرفت على طلبة الماجستير والدكتوراه في مجال البحث التربوي. كما تعاونت مع إدارة التعليم في كوينسلاند ومع اتحاد المناهج التعليمية في استراليا في مشاريع تعليمية على المستوى المحلي والفيدرالي، مثل تطوير مواد تعليمية رقمية لطلبة اللغة الإنجليزية كلغة ثانية. قدمت البروفيسورة كريستينا أبحاثها في أكثر من 140 مؤتمرا دوليا، وكانت متحدثة مدعوة في أكثر من 60 فعالية مهنية. كما نشرت 75 ورقة بحثية في مجالات محكمة وفصول كتب تناولت اكتساب اللغة وطرائق التدريس. وهي مؤلفة ومحررة مشاركة لعدد أكثر من 13 كتابا في تعليم اللغة والبحث العلمي. قد شغلت منصب رئيس تحرير مجلة Learning and Teaching in Higher Education Gulf Perspective. كما أنها أخصائية معتمدة من الأبل في التعليم المهني، وتشرف من خلال مركز الابتكار التربوي على مقرر منح التعليم والتعلم وتطوير الموارد الخاصة بالبحث العلمي. ولذا ندع المنصة لها فلتتقدم لإدارة هذه الندوة. كريستينا, the floor is for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks, of course, to Her Excellency Mahra Al-Mutawi from the Regional Center for Educational Planning, which is operating under the auspices of UNESCO, for organizing such an important event, and also for her kind introduction. Today's event comprises 2 sessions with 3 speakers in session 1 and 2 speakers in session 2. As the moderator of today's webinar, I will be introducing each of our esteemed speakers in each of the 2 sessions. During their presentations, of course, feel free to type in the chat any questions that you might have for them. We will be collecting your questions and we will answer them, addressing them to each speaker at the end of each of the 2 sessions. Now, our first session, which focuses on creativity as a catalyst for future learning, will start with a presentation by Dr. Stefan Vincent-Lancrin. Dr. Stefan is a senior analyst, project leader, and deputy head of division at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He works for the OECD Center for Education, Research and Innovation, and leads its work on innovation in education and education for innovation. While Dr. Stefan's work covers all levels of education, he has worked extensively on higher education and has authored a number of OECD reports focusing on important topics such as ensuring quality in higher education and measuring innovation in education. Before joining the OECD, Dr. Stefan worked as lecturer and researcher in economics at the University of Paris-Nanterre and the London School of Economics. He is a Marie Curie Fellow and a Fulbright New Century Scholar. Welcome, Dr. Stefan. It is our distinct pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Gizaki, and thank you for the invitation, and Excellency and colleagues. That's really my pleasure to be here today. And what I'm going to do is to share with you some actually results from a long-standing study that we have had at the OECD on how to foster creativity and innovation. And it all started with, as I'm going to go to the lessons, but basically started with this idea that many countries in the world have had in terms of what we've called, change towards competency-based curricula, and where the big question was, how do we actually foster skills at the same time as we impart knowledge to our students? And so the big question for that one was, how does it look like in practice? Not so much do we want to do it, because most people were kind of aligned with this agenda, but it was more a question of implementation in many ways. And so we've developed what I would call a kind of innovation method, so how to actually make this work by working with teachers in primary, secondary, and currently we're finishing work in higher education, and working with students in different levels as well, obviously. And what we've done is to provide them with a toolkit of tools, rubrics, lesson plans, syllabi, or examples of courses and assessments. Provide them with some level of professional learning where they could actually work with all these ideas, and ask them to redesign some of their lesson plans. And we have this kind of iterative process and dynamic process over time. The objectives we had was really that, the belief of the teachers would change over time, and that actually they would have a sense of how to develop the creativity or the critical thinking of their students, and also that then it would actually lead to a change of their instructional practices, pedagogical practices, and assessments. And that ultimately, that's something that, of course, takes a bit more time, that we would, at the end of the day, have both an improvement of student learning in the subjects, because we hope that this method makes learning more engaging, more authentic for the students, but also that it would, at the same time as it would develop their knowledge, also the skills, and notably their creativity skills. So I'm going to throw to all these lessons that we've had, so I would say we have 10 big policy lessons on how to support change through the fostering of creativity. And I'm not going to read all these points right now, because I'm going actually to go through each of them. So the first one that we found that is very important is really to be explicit in your education policy. And so basically be clear about what are the kind of skills that you want to develop. So at the OECD, we have, this learning compass, and, where we want to develop knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values in students. Another way that we had to think about it is, to put everything on the skill level and actually think of the knowledge as the technical skills in the subject. So the know what and the know-how, or in every different subjects. Have the development of higher order thinking skills like creativity, and also the development of social and emotional skills like self-confidence, agency, collaboration, etc. It is very important for people to actually know explicitly what all these different skills are. But it's not enough. The second that is very important is that we have to define what we're talking about. And in the case of creativity, what we could find is that we had creativity as one of the objectives of many curriculum, official curricula, but they were not really defined and they were totally disconnected from the actual implementation in the subjects. So what we did is to go back to the research literature and see what people agreed on. And so we've come up with, a kind of pretty common definition of creativity as the ability to produce work that is novel and appropriate. And it's very important, the second part, appropriate, because we tend to think of creativity as being original, but it has to be being original within a certain framework. Otherwise, of course, anything goes. It's easy to be different, but it's not so easy to be different within the scope of a specific problem. And so in terms of the cognitive processes, we psychologists of creativity talk a lot about the divergent aspects of thinking, which is exploratory, and the convergent part, which integrates different types of elements into a new and interesting or appropriate combination. In terms of attitudes, it really requires to be more at ease, more open with unusual and daring ideas. And one very important point that we really had to make was actually doesn't have to be new to the world, but really new to oneself. And especially that's really what we can expect in the case of education, where, usually 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds are not going to produce something that is actually new to the world, but if they do something that is already pretty new to themselves, that's a very important aspect. To support it, we have worked with rubrics. So here, that's what we've called a conceptual rubric, which is just about identifying what the different skills are. The idea at the end for a rubric is that it will become kind of implicit, and so you will just think of, do I give my students enough room to inquire, imagine, do, and reflect on something? And in the case of creativity, which is coming up with ideas and solutions, the idea was to make connections to other concepts and knowledge from the same or other disciplines, generate and play with unusual and daring ideas, produce or envision something, and reflect on the novelty of what they've been doing, but also on its possible consequences. So that was really, and what we've done actually was to have a lot of derivative of this rubric for a lot of different subjects, because the teachers we worked with felt like some liked the generic one, but they wanted to have something which was actually more applied to the different subjects that they were teaching. And so we have some in music, science, mathematics, language art, visual arts, etc. The third very important aspect to support this kind of policies is to really integrate these skills into the regular disciplinary curriculum. And so one of the big challenges that we had was really to showcase what it looks like to teach mathematics, science, visual arts, music, or whatever else, and develop these skills. And so here, as mentioned, there is usually this disconnect between the ambition, which is actually described usually in the opening of the curriculum paper, but doesn't translate into the method that are shown to the teachers in terms of what they should be doing, and also which actually has to break with this idea that, for example, creativity is something that is for arts teachers only and not for the other ones. The main reason why it has to be done in all the different subjects is that, well, for example, the arts are not taught enough to actually really develop creativity in a way that will transfer to the other subjects, but also that people have to realize that creativity is something that can be done and is useful whatever the topic. And if every teacher or if we have chances to do it for every subject, then actually you may have enough repetition so that you actually make progress and learn for the skills. Another point which is very important is that it has to be part of the formal assessments and evaluations, and also that there are alignments and incentives at all levels of education. So that's really why also we work on primary, secondary, and higher education. So in terms of the assessments and evaluation, so what is happening in the classroom cannot just be limited to the subject knowledge if we also want to develop some other skills. And so, for example, we need to ask students and see how good they are at brainstorming, providing different ideas, how they can actually produce something which is a bit more daring than what they do usually. And this also has to come through the teacher's feedback and assessment and the way of actually talking and the kind of dialogue that you have in a classroom. But it's also important to, when people do school or teacher evaluation, for example, through the inspectorate, where there is some, or when actually we do standardized assessment of the education system to get a sense of how the whole education system is doing. So for that, we have also developed assessment rubrics that will actually articulate different levels of progression. And so we have, for creativity, two aspects. One, which is about process, if you can actually observe the learning process, and one is a product or what the students has produced. It can be a quiz, it can be an essay, it can be an artifact. But in fact, it's really for other people to judge when they haven't seen the actual process of producing this product. That's what we've tried to do at the OECD, and as you know, PISA 2022 had really creative thinking as one of its innovative domain, and so we actually tried to showcase that it is actually possible to develop assessment that measure in a comparative way, the creative thinking of students beyond the other skills, and we've done it in different subdomains because creativity is always actually anchored in a particular subject. And last but not least, it is really important to think of alignment. I've mentioned the one with assessment, so you have to teach it if you want people to learn it, and you have to assess it if you want people to teach it and to learn it. You have to do it in primary and secondary and tertiary education, even so, of course, it will look slightly different. It depends on the age and the level of proficiency of the students. And you have to do it in formative ways. You have to do it to align, what you do formatively, what you do, for example, between secondary and higher education. So where there is a university entrance exam, it is a very important aspect to take into account, or the end of high school exam. And it has actually perhaps more difficult, but try to connect informal and formal education. So we need to also use some of, the informal dimensions of education to try to reinforce all these different skills. One thing that we found that now moving a little bit closer to the school level is that it is very important for the school leaders to support this agenda and make teachers feel authorized to do it. And also to really, when they start at least this journey, to provide teachers with professional learning opportunities so that they have time actually to develop their competence into doing that. And so usually, we have professional development strategies which are based on in-service teacher training, so pre-service and shaping, and it's actually important to have these dimensions integrated at all these different forms of professional learning. One thing we need to keep in mind is that, and that's what we really could see during, when we've started to work with practitioners and coordinators and policymakers, that in fact asking people to change is a source of professional development in itself, because suddenly you're not exactly competent and you start talking to your colleagues about how do you do this? Can you give me a tip on that? Can I use your lesson, etc.? And so you have actually this self-challenging that makes people improve and progress. But they also need to have resources, examples, teachers, and effective strategies, to actually implement that. We've seen for people who actually worked with us, through in our project, that the effects I'm just describing largely happened, and you can actually see that people had a lot of discussions about the students' creativity with other teachers in their school, and they have a lot of discussions, and that actually it mainly happens within the school rather than elsewhere. It can also happen elsewhere, but much more often within the school. And there was a big support of the school principals in terms of the use of a project, and we could see that the few cases where it didn't work so well was either when we had only one session of professional development and then the teachers were left to themselves, or where actually there was no involvement of the school leaders, and so the teachers were feeling a little bit more unseen, trying to do things a bit differently and not necessarily supported. So that's really a very essential part. And right now, we are actually at the OECD, we have developed a kind of a universal generic professional learning program for teachers to use creativity as a way to improve the quality of their teaching and learning. And we're starting to some work in different countries and with different institutions to actually adapt and localize these generic professional learning program to the actual context of different countries. And so if some people in the audience are interested, just feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. The eighth lesson is really that we need to provide teachers with scaffolding tools. We need to give them examples. I've already presented the rubrics that we had, but that was not enough. We also had to provide them with actually examples of lesson plans that would actually show how to implement these different things, and actually showing them also how to actually do it. So that's one example of a music lesson which is really focused on creativity, and where actually students had to choose an area of their school and find the sound that characterize it. To compose something, a 3-minute piece in small groups using different sounds. So whatever there is in their school, but can be their own bodies, voices, and asking them to reflect the area of that school. Then we ask each group to actually perform to the class and record their performance, and with the others trying to guess what actually they try to show, and then an evaluation of what people have been doing. And so that's really something which is mainly focused on creativity, but a little bit of critical thinking when to give constructive feedback to others is actually also being used for that one. And we have a lot of other examples of these things as part of an app that we have. You can see the URL at the bottom. What's very important in what the example I'm showing is that we're really trying to develop both the subject knowledge and the creativity at the same time. You can see in the lesson plan I've just shown that actually you're learning about music. You have to perform, you have to compose, you have to listen, you have to try to reproduce something, to do something in a group, so you're also learning a little bit of collaborative skills at the same time as you are actually exercising your creativity, because you need to think a bit out of the box in terms of how do I convey what is going on in this place. And we do it also in an age-appropriate way, So this one is actually for the primary school students. And we have one which is slightly more challenging for the high school student, which is exactly the same, except that we also asked that a more emotional element for the high school students. So what we found is that usually the rubrics that we had were pretty useful for people to start to design their lesson plans, but they were not enough. And so we've also provided them with a quality checklist to see whether they were doing well. And so you can see here, they're very much aligned with the science of learning, and learning science. And basically where the idea is to, start by trying to create the need interest to learn of the students by connecting into their life in some ways, or actually sometimes by asking very big questions and philosophical questions, which usually they are very interested in, even so we don't usually have the answer to many of them. Second thing we've noted is that some of the things that they were asked to do were not challenging enough. And that's one of the things that both doesn't make it interesting enough, but also doesn't actually help them to learn something when they try to do it. And so that's a very important point, to find the right level, that is but make sure that it's not too easy. Second thing that people tried to do was to actually divorce the creativity and the subject knowledge. And so what we really asked them to do was to be very clear on what were the learning outcomes in the subjects, like in the music example that I've shown, and what was actually really trying to develop, their creative skills. The fourth thing, which we found actually surprisingly more difficult than we expected, was to really have the development of a product. Perhaps in some cases, for the sake of time, we tend to think of, the learning as a way to take a quiz to make sure that we can actually move on. And so there is a lot of time very little ways or time for people to actually apply their knowledge, and so to really have something which is more meaningful. It can be a presentation, a product, it can be an artifact, if you know, it can be an essay or something, a reflection, but it has to be more than just taking a quiz to verify that the knowledge was there. We found that, you know, the point 5 and 6 here, letting the students co-design part of the deal, and the problems and having problems that can be looked at from different perspectives is really one of the things that teachers also struggled with in some ways, you know, because they are used to tell people to do that, but to do something specific. But in that case, there is sometimes, you know, very little room for actually people to express their agency and their own creativity. And also that they have to find problems that, you know, are not 2 + 2, what is the answer? Because then, you know, we cannot look at them. So you need to have some kind of complex problems, which requires that they leave room for the unexpected. So it means that it's possible that some of the students will ask them to do things that they are not knowledgeable about, you know, uncomfortable with, but that's okay, you know. So it's a lot of preparation, but also an element of letting go at some point as well. And finally, one thing that, I mean, I think we all struggle with, not just teachers, or is really to take the time to reflect on what we've been doing, and so, you know, have this other aspect as well. The way we've done it, and which is a very important one, is really to have it as part of a community of practice or of professional learning community, whether it's domestic or international. And the work I've been describing, you know, we've worked over 2 school years in 11 countries with a lot of people, different cultures, and that really helped, you know, the learning of the teachers and all the people who were involved in it. And finally, very important to monitor and evaluate the effect, and so that's what we've done as well. Develop instruments to actually see how this is working, and really with the idea that this will actually help to change the course and improve the quality of the learning. And so, you know, we had actually probably too complex monitoring framework in our case because it was research heavy, and so in a policy context, you don't have to go that big, but you need to monitor what is going, what people are struggling with, what is successful. And for that, you need to actually have rigorous methods to do it. And so that your innovation is not just any kind of innovation, but a very disciplined innovation. So I'm going to close here. I wanted to perhaps make a few comments on digital, but we have actually one thing on digital afterwards in the next presentation, so that I will leave it to there. And so I would like to wrap up and remind you of the 10 points. Be explicit in your education policy, define what you're talking about, integrate the skill in the regular disciplinary curriculum, make it part of formal evaluations, create alignment at all levels of education. So you shouldn't have a disconnect or disincentive to learn these things if you want to enter a prestigious higher education institutions. Make sure that people feel allowed and are supported, provide them with learning opportunities, but also with actual tools showcasing what it looks like. Work together as part of either domestic or international community of practice and evaluate so that you can know what is going well and you can continue to improve all these things. So that's not easy to do, you know, and so here that's an Alice quote, you know, that we know that education systems are sluggish in some ways, and so we all spend a lot of energy trying to just keeping them running. But as we have actually shown through this study, it is possible to do it. So I'm trying to go back to the last one. And so thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Professor Stefan. So it was a very useful and very practical presentation on what it is like to actually implement creativity in the classroom, help the students develop the creativity skills. Now, to our audience, because Dr. Stefan cannot stay until the end of the session, we will direct your questions to him right now. So let's see what questions you have submitted in the chat. So, Dr. Stefan, is it possible to prepare an innovative assessment network that is not limited to just assessing information, or content knowledge within the classrooms, but also assessing life practices. You mentioned how assessment and evaluation of creativity skills must be part of the evaluation of learning, assessment evaluation of learning. So how do you envision this happening within a standardized assessment? Is it possible? What are the indicators of this assessment? I'm reading the audience question. What are the indicators of this assessment to achieve a comprehensive and innovative assessment? So move away from just assessing knowledge of content and more towards the kind of assessment that you have been describing, where we can actually see, are we doing a good job developing students' creativity skills?
So I think that there are two questions. I think the most important is to change not the standardized assessments, which are national evaluation that mainly serve in many places to actually evaluate the quality of the education system, but really the high-stakes exam and what is going on in the classroom. We don't have to stop evaluating subject knowledge, because I think it is very important, but we perhaps have to start evaluating it more in a more applied way, on how you can actually mobilize and use it in different ways. And so that is possible, and we have actually provided a lot of examples of assignments and types of assessment that can serve that purpose. Now, in terms of a network of assessments, I think we can do that. There is actually one which exists, which is called the FLIP community. So if some of you want to be part of that, it's something that has been launched by colleagues in Europe, but which is open to everyone, and we share a lot of the different practices and items, etc. And we have tried actually, the OECD and other places to try to also measure these different aspects in different ways. But we have to think that standardized assessment is a very long, I would say, technology that has taken a lot of time to develop. We've been working on this standardized assessment of mathematics and literacy for over 100 years, This is not true for many of the new things that we're trying to measure now, and so we also have to be patient and also be ready to change the format of assessments, For example, if I wanted to know what is the level of, let's say, creativity in a specific subject in science, or then instead of having a standardized assessment, I could actually try to collect a sample of work that is happening within all the different schools, and then actually get it rated across, this kind of criteria. And then if I do that every 2-3 years, then actually I would have a standardized way of measuring the progress of my education system in that direction. And I'm saying that because a lot of the standardized assessment, as you know, have not been designed to measure all the breadth of and the width of the skill that we're talking about here.
Which makes the work that you've done all the more important, because you have actually broken down the skills involved in creativity, the skills involved in critical thinking, and you have provided very useful rubrics for teachers to guide them in their efforts to not just to teach creativity, but also to see to what extent they're being effective in that respect. So thank you very much, Dr. Stefan, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us this afternoon, and of course share your knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And keeping up with the time, we will now continue our program with our next esteemed speaker, Ms. Njideka Hari. Ms. Njideka is President and CEO of the Youth for Technology Foundation in Nigeria. In this role, she is responsible for setting the organization's strategy, overseeing its programs, and managing the foundation's relationships with public and private partners. Ms. Njideka is an Ashoka Fellow, and in 2013, she was awarded Social Entrepreneur of the Year by the Schwab Foundation and the World Economic Forum. It is our pleasure to welcome you to our event, Njideka. If you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. or Professor Gitsaki. It's definitely an honor to be here today. Forgive me, I have a little bit of a cold, so my voice may appear a little bit muffled at this time. I will go ahead and just share my screen if that's okay. Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever part of the world we are in. I'm in Judaica, Harry, and I am the founder of an organization called Youth for Technology Foundation, YTF. And Youth for Technology Foundation was established about 2 decades ago, working at the intersection of education and technology. So about 20 years ago, when Youth for Technology Foundation was founded, there were very, very few organizations, especially smaller grassroots organizations, working at the intersection of youth and technology, or the intersection of education and technology, and definitely very few actually putting young people at the center of their own development. And so YTF, Youth for Technology Foundation, is designed to do that. The mission of the organization is simple but powerful, and that is to create enriched learning communities where the appropriate use of technology affords opportunities for young people and their mothers, primarily living in low-income and/or developing world communities. At Youth for Technology, we believe that creativity is not a luxury. It's really a necessity for equitable innovation in the world today. And as we've seen with the advent of emerging technologies and fourth industrial technologies as well, the inequity in access to education and technology is just becoming larger. And so it is of paramount importance that organizations like Youth for Technology are really focused on continuing to bridge that divide as the introduction of newer and emerging technologies exacerbates that divide. We've operated again at the intersection of education and entrepreneurship, anywhere from the introduction of basic digital literacy through human-centered design, robotics, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and artificial intelligence. All of these technologies, of course, fuel creativity. It's such a pleasure to be here today because it coincides, of course, with International Day of Creativity and innovation, and really is a global call to really imagine how we solve problems, particularly in these underserved and rural communities. And as we celebrate the day, I, for one, I'm reminded that really empowering the next generation with equitable access to creativity-driven tools and technologies is not just inspiring, or it's not really like a fairness objective. It's actually an economic imperative, and to remain focused on that. When I thought about creativity and this particular session in the school or the education setting, of course, of paramount importance was artificial intelligence and the rate of growth of artificial intelligence within the context of creativity. We know that this technology, of course, holds promises for transforming education, but also the risk of deepening those inequalities that we've talked about, particularly in rural communities. Oftentimes, of course, the data sets exclude many voices, especially younger people and elderly people living in rural communities and have less access to resources. And then we know that without inclusive design, of course, artificial intelligence widens the gaps in learning opportunities. The World Economic Forum issued a report around Education 4.0 and the influence of artificial intelligence, which estimated that under 1% of all artificial intelligent budgets actually target positive impact in underserved regions. So there is a need to continue to educate. There's a need to continue to invest in these regions. When we think about how we foster creativity and critical thinking using technology, there are 5 different angles. The first, of course, beginning with the people that we are serving. And many of you have heard this term called empathy thrown around quite a bit, which is the core of design thinking and the core of design development, right? And empathy is simply putting yourself in the same shoes as the users of the technology. And so we start this process with really thinking about, what digital tools can guide learners through this iterative process of problem solving and prototyping. What we want to do with young people that we serve is we really want to shift their mindsets. We want them to start to think about different ways to learn, unlearn, and relearn these new technologies and get these exposure to those technologies. And they do that through project-based learning. Artificial intelligence, as well as AR and VR platforms, really kind of immerse these students in real world challenges that require original thinking. So it's not just about teaching them to be users of this technology, but really teaching them to be innovative, kind of pioneers of this technology, right? Being able to identify what concrete realities exist in their communities and then developing technological solutions using project-based learning to solve those concrete realities. Of course, collaborative whiteboards and adaptive learning systems also go very, very hand in hand in the sense that adaptive learning systems personalizes these learning paths for these young people and their teachers, allowing them to go at their own pace. We also provide training to the teachers also in and out of the classroom and the school system, working with the different ministries of education. So the goal is not just to use technology for technology's sake, but how do you use it creatively and critically to really shape a more inclusive and an innovative world. I've touched on this a little bit, but the relevance of policy in all of this is very pivotal, and policy is supposed to come ahead of everything else that follows, because without adequate investment, this digital inequity and the imminent reality for young people to fall behind creativity-wise remains. So it's important to, of course, invest in infrastructure. In many of these communities that we work in, primarily in Africa, we're expanding, there's a need to expand access to, of course, reliable internet, electricity, and devices in underserved areas. Also, I cannot overemphasize the importance of public-private partnerships. Like, no one of us can do this work alone. The citizen sector cannot do the work alone. The private sector needs the citizen sector, which includes the education sector, to prepare young people for a future of work that none of us really knows exactly what that would look like, right? So the intersection and the collaboration between the public, the private, and the citizen sector is extremely important. Of course, we can't leave the teachers out. There's no way that we can actually inspire creativity in and out of the classroom, ensure that young people are in the driver's seat of their own development as far as technology is concerned, with not incorporating teachers and ensuring that they have the adequate amount of training so that even in instances where they are not directly influencing learning in the classroom, they are able to, what we call being, a sage on the stage. So they're able to guide, they're able to mentor these young people using the technology. And then monitoring and evaluation. No program implementation is realistic without embedding M&E and measurements and looking at impact into the general framework. I just want to quickly highlight one of our initiatives that started in Nigeria a couple of years ago, and that was recently showcased in a Lighthouse report that the World Economic Forum issued about a year ago. And it's 3D Africa for Girls. And 3D Africa for Girls really uses it provides high quality STEM education in Nigeria, helping young girls primarily between the ages of 10 to 18, so somewhere between the beginning of middle school and the end of high school, enabling them to design and prototype 3D printing products. So when we think about creativity, how can we give the power back to these young people, particularly those in rural and less accessible areas? How do we give them their power back? And the way we give them their power back is by helping them envision a world that they want to live in. And how do they envision a world that they want to live in? When they're able to create products, they're able to create services using technology that they can touch and feel to develop solutions to some of their concrete realities. And so that's what we do with 3D Africa for Girls. The program leverages a combination of targeted job shadowing and mentoring, 3D design using SolidWorks, as well as different computer-aided design tools like Tinkercad, helping these girls to express creativity and turn their ideas into products. When we look also at the intersection of AI and different adaptive learning platforms, one of the things that we look to do in really encouraging creativity is by ensuring that some of the AI algorithms adapt content based on the individual learner needs and progress. So rather than just a standalone model that pretty much starts over every time, the young people have an opportunity to kind of influence the decision of these algorithms through their behavior. And so we have integrated that into our programming and in our learning paths as well. Hand in hand with that also comes, providing real-time feedback, right? Instant insights that help learners reflect and iterate their work. So we're not necessarily taking away the human aspect of things, but ensuring that they have access to this technology to enhance the human aspect of things, so that human tutoring is seen more of a support rather than actually driving the actual learning process. And then supporting inclusivity. So introducing tools that accommodate diverse learning styles, languages, as well as accessibility needs. Very much as artificial intelligence is spoken about, not as much as we would like is spoken about kind of the ethical considerations, but more and more this is emerging as marketplace dialogue. As people get more access to generative AI, are learning to use that. We know that in the education setting, the principles should be guided by really human dignity at the center, right? With fairness and transparency as well. And so really ensuring that we are maintaining a central role for teachers and we're avoiding the over-reliance on automated decisions. So teachers still and have always had a role in the classroom, in and out of the classroom, even with the introduction of these technologies in enhancing creativity. Again, we are looking to not just teach people how to use the computers or use the technology, but we're teaching them how to create the technology. We are actually very cognizant of some of the national education policies, particularly in the countries that we have a footprint in, looking at Nigeria as well. While the policy is still relatively new, a couple of years young, but it has still made a lot of stronghold in terms of ensuring that the citizen sector and nonprofit organizations were an integral part of the development of that policy and influencing the policy both at the local level, the state level, as well as the federal level as well. And some of the other points mentioned on this slide, I will not go through again because I've touched on these points, things like public-private alignment and promoting locally relevant content on some of the earlier slides. I just want to come back again to thinking about teachers. Many of us remember the COVID lockdown where, we moved from classroom settings where teachers were telling their students to leave their cell phones, for instance, out of the classroom, right? Cell phones were not allowed in the classroom. And then with COVID, we transformed very quickly into a world where schools were on the cell phone. So we went from leave your cell phones outside the classroom to bring your cell phone because that's where the school is. In the same way, we've seen some of these technologies. Initially, there was a lot of fear around the influence of AI and creativity, but more and more as teachers who are primary stakeholders for this, as they are getting the training and they are understanding how to use the technology and tools creativity more creatively, they are actually coming into play. So we want to emphasize, continued professional development, hands-on training for both students and their teachers as well, around, digital pedagogy from design thinking all the way to AI literacy. And then what we are doing as an organization is ensuring that we are not creating curriculum in a standalone manner. So we're working with both the private sector, we're working with the ministries of education, so that our young people coming out of schools, the secondary school, going into the university, or coming out of the secondary school into the world of work, fully understand what the world of work is looking for. So we bring the private sector into our classrooms to co-create this type of technology or to co-create our curriculum for the future of work. And my very last slide here is, I want to emphasize the importance when we think about creativity, the importance of cross-cultural collaboration, connecting students globally, which builds some of the softer skills, but skills that, though they are called soft skills, they're actually harder to learn. Skills like global citizenship skills, as well as empathy. And one way that Youth for Technology Foundation does this is through our collaboration with some of our other programs that are being facilitated outside of Nigeria. So for instance, the sister program for 3D Africa for girls is 3D Printing Academy for girls, which is based in the US. And so marginalized middle school age girls from that program get to collaborate with middle and high school age girls living in rural communities in Nigeria. And while they learn the technology together, while they learn to innovate together, they're also learning leadership, communication, cross-cultural collaboration across both worlds. So we think that that is extremely important to emphasize, especially in this time and in this world of work. In conclusion, I will just end with a couple of things. One, that, as we look to creativity, artificial intelligence being an integral part of this creativity, we should understand that AI is not the future. It's actually the now. And the integration into education systems is really accelerating learning transformation globally. And Africa must not only act as a consumer, but as a creator of AI-driven solutions, grounded in equity, cultural relevance, and context. And then personalization, not standardization. Artificial intelligence, of course, enables truly personalized learning experiences, adaptive content, real-time feedback, and inclusive tools for diverse learning needs. Teachers remain irreplaceable. AI augments, not replaces teachers. And so our efforts to continue to empower educators with AI actually frees them to focus on other skills that they bring, such as mentorship, creativity, and social emotional learning. Equity and responsibility should be at the core. As the fourth industrial revolution continues to materialize and there's change globally, it's very important that we look to continuing to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, particularly young people growing up in developing and low-income communities. It is the responsibility of all of us to commit and affirm the need for fairness, inclusiveness, accountability, and transparency in the whole process. And the time to act is now. AI in education and in ensuring a creative and collaborative education community can leapfrog traditional barriers. So let's co-create a future where all learners, and not just users of AI, but really all learners, are innovators, designers, and leaders in this evolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring presentation, Njideka, and for sharing with us such a hopeful and promising vision of what our world could look like if we all collaborate and co-create. We will now move to the third presentation for session 1, after which we will continue with the questions from the audience before we move to the second part of this webinar. So I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, Professor George Odiambo from the College of Education at the United Arab Emirates University here in the UAE. Professor George is a distinguished professor in educational leadership and policy. He is renowned for his expertise in educational leadership from an international perspective. He has been educated actually around the world with degrees from the University of New England in Australia, the University of Oxford in England, and the University of Stirling in Scotland. He has dedicated his career to exploring the intricacies of educational leadership in diverse cultural contexts. His research has consistently emphasized the importance of cross-cultural leadership competencies in today's interconnected world. His commitment to excellence in educational leadership, combined with his passion for fostering international perspectives and innovative approaches to leader development, has earned him recognition as a leading scholar in the field. Professor George, it is our pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. We're looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Christina, for the kind introduction. I'm really excited to explore with you how leadership can shape creative and innovative learning environments in schools. I'll try to share my slides with you now.
Yes, can you please click on that tab to put it on presentation mode?
I hope it's in presentation mode now.
Yes,
That's correct.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. So my topic for discussion with you today is shaping creative schools, leadership discourses, and the design of innovative learning environments. As you have been told in the introduction, my area of research over the years have been in educational leadership and policy, and therefore this is an area that I'm really passionate about. My presentation today will explore how leadership supports creativity and innovation in schools. And there are 6 questions that will frame my presentation today. The first question is, what is creativity in educational practices? The second question is, what leadership practices foster creativity? The third question is, how do we balance vision and operations? The fourth question is, what governance supports innovation? And the fifth question is, what is the role of community partnerships? And what does leadership partnership for development look like? So the aim of this presentation, I would say, is to examine leadership not as a static management, but as a dynamic practice which enables both creativity and also enables innovation in different aspects. So this is what my focus will be on today. So I would like to say that while there's a lot of interest in creative thinking in schools, very clear interest across the world, as you can see from my slide, in Asia, in the US, in the European Union, in Australia, and in the UAE as well. And Dr. Stephen also talked about this in his presentation. I still believe that detailed understanding of its implementation in educational jurisdiction and most importantly in schools is still hard to come by. And I think that this is something that we need to seriously think about. Although there's a lot of interest in this, I think we still need to rethink how this is being used in schools. Now, Dr. Stephen had already defined for us what creativity is really about, and I'm using a 2023 reference here in trying to define what creativity is about. So creativity is a material, a mental, or a social process that leads to the production of novel and useful ideas, approaches, and solutions. So it involves the generation and exploration of ideas made possible through both experimental and evaluative thinking. Creativity is, I would say that creativity has always been there. So human beings have always been creative. The fact that we have survived in the planet itself is a testimony to this. Humans have adapted and then began to modify their environment. And to me, this is creativity. So this is exactly what we are talking about here. Now, we can conclude that creativity, specifically with regard to education, is therefore the interaction between the learning environment, which could be both physical as well as social, the attitudes and attributes of both teachers and students, and a clear problem-solving process which produces some products which are, I would say, visible, which can be seen, products that can clearly be seen. Now, we are using 2 words here. We are using the word creativity. We are also using the word innovation. So these are two words that we are using. I thought it's good for us to think about these 2 words that are now very, very popular, not just in educational organizations, but organizations in general, creativity and innovation. Creativity is coming up with the new and useful ideas, and innovation, I see it as successful implementation of these new ideas. Therefore, these 2 come hand in hand. So innovation springs from creative application of knowledge, and I see creativity innovation as coming from creativity. So creativity is coming out with new ideas and new ways of doing things. And then innovation is simply how you successfully implement these new ideas. So I wanted to move to the next slide and just thinking about why innovation is really important. I would say that innovation is no longer optional in organizations and no longer optional in schools. The world has changed, and yet many schools have remained a bit rigid. So we must rethink leadership to align with future-ready education. Education must not only be comprehensive and sustainable, but it must also continuously evolve. It's important that education evolves because the world is changing. What is urgent about this? So it's changing student needs, it's changing technology that our previous speaker just talked about. There's a lot of complexities in the world. The challenge for schools is that many schools are still following, I would say, outdated models. And there is opportunity here, opportunity for creativity, opportunity for innovation. And these opportunities can lead to it can lead to, I would say, positive outcomes for both students and the schools in general. How is leadership part of this? Or where does leadership come in all this? So we are talking about opportunities for students, opportunities for teachers, opportunities for schools. How does leadership come into all this? So we must shift our thinking away from, as educational leaders, it's important that we shift our thinking away from the top-down leadership to a leadership that is more collaborative, a leadership that is more culturally responsive, a leadership that is more inquiry-driven. So the old concept of a heroic leader, I think, is in crisis in our current schools and in our current education system. We must now see leaders as those who influence and share a lot of things that are common to everybody in the organization. And leaders can successfully encourage organizational creativity and innovation. How can they do this? They can do this by designing the organization to foster an environment that is conducive for creativity, that creativity can flourish in this environment. In my leadership studies, I've always thought that there are two leadership, I would call them leadership styles, if you want to call them leadership practices, or you want to call them leadership behaviors that I think resonate with this kind of development, with moving into creativity. The first one is the concept of quiet leadership. I think quiet leadership really resonates with this. I'm a believer in the concept of quiet leadership. Quiet leaders know that a key part of transforming performance is getting the other person to find their own answers. I believe that these are the leaders who can successfully lead creativity and innovation in education. And that is why I was saying earlier that the concept of heroic leaders is in crisis at the moment. The other leadership concept and leadership practice or leadership style that I seriously believe that can really contribute to this is the soft leadership style. Soft leadership with its 11 C's can create a conducive environment for creativity. The 11 C's of soft leadership are character, charisma, conscience, conviction, courage, communication, compassion, commitment, consistency, consideration, and contribution. So I believe that we need to emphasize the concept of quiet leadership, the concept of soft leadership, and around contextual approaches to leadership, where you as a leader do not see yourself as somebody who is on top of what's happening, but somebody who is working with other people. So these are the kind of leaders who I think currently can bring creativity and innovation in the education system. And that's why I'm emphasizing the concept of quiet leadership and the concept of soft leadership. These two leadership approaches would definitely create a conducive environment for creativity and innovation. It is not about the heroic leader. And as I've said, and as I've always said, the concept of heroic leadership is in crisis in our school system and in our education system in general. I would like to slightly challenge our previous speaker, Dr. Stephen. Dr. Stephen said that PISA has developed some assessments that encourage creativity, which is okay. I agree with that. He also talked about how creativity can be part of the assessment system. But I think that I strongly believe that there's a current dilemma in the educational system. A lot of research and multiple analyses have shown that testing, and especially high-stakes testing, is changing the way educational systems, the way that schools and teachers conceive and practice teaching. Tests can make teachers think and act more narrowly, I believe, and also can make teachers distort curriculum so that the focus is placed on facts and also things like instrumental skills and not on problem-based learning and creativity. I therefore believe that there's this dilemma in the education system. On one hand, there are students' academic outcomes which must be achieved through tests and through the league tables. And on the other hand, we are trying to ask students to be innovative and to be creative. So finding answers to this basic dilemma is at the very heart of contemporary educational reflections worldwide. This is not just specific to one country. This is a problem worldwide. You know, the dilemma between student outcomes, academic outcomes, you know, schools competing so that this school has done better than the other one in the examinations or national examination. And on the other side, we are trying to make students be more innovative, be more creative. I think that this is a big dilemma and that this is something that must always be discussed. It's at the heart of contemporary educational reflections. So when the core emphasis in schooling is moved from the process of learning and moved to the outcomes of learning as measured by tests, there is a risk that teachers are likely to adopt their teaching to the ways the tests are constructed. And when this happens, there is a risk for innovation and creative competencies being lost in the course of doing this. From a lot of research, it's been very, very clear that this is hurting our education systems worldwide. The emphasis in league tables and the emphasis in national exams and which school is doing better than the other in what exams is hurting our education system, and it's also hurting innovation and hurting creativity in the education system. So how can we support creative school cultures? The school culture which is needed for innovation, I think is a culture that allows for experimentation, a culture that allows for reflection, a culture that protects time for collaboration, a culture that promotes student agency. Student agency is about self-reflection and intentional actions and interaction with the environment, and a culture that allows for students' voice. I strongly believe that leaders should cultivate an environment where creativity becomes normal. And this is what I'm talking about here, creating a school culture where creativity is part of what's happening within the school, and where students feel empowered to come out with new ideas and new ways of doing things rather than working in boxes or in corners. So this is what our current leaders in education really need to emphasize. They need to support culture in schools that would lead to creativity. My next slide talks about a balance between vision and operations. I think the real challenge in education for educational leaders is managing both the big picture of education and also, or the big picture thinking, and also managing the daily school life, I think that this is a huge challenge to educational leaders. Educational leaders, therefore, because this is a challenge, they need to have effective systems and smart delegation that can help them to make space for innovation. There is tension generally between strategy and between the daily demands. And delegations and lean operations is the way forward in meeting this. Also, the school leaders need to have innovation as their priority. My next slide talks about governance and collaborative innovation. We need to think about how governance can either support or block innovation. And there are models that drive innovations. For example, adaptive models, distributed leadership, flattened hierarchies, use of cross-functional teams. These are models that can drive innovation that we need to think about. We need to therefore utilize these models so that we can achieve innovation and creativity in our education system. I can see Professor Christina is with us, so that means that I'm almost running out of time, so I'm going to move faster. Where is the place of community in all this that we have been talking about? I think that community engagement boosts creativity. Local partnerships can bring real world relevance to the schools, can deepen learning and also root innovation and authentic contexts. Leadership development is another area. We must now rethink how we prepare school leaders. Programs should model innovation, emphasize things like flexibility, and encourage peer-to-peer learning. In conclusion, I've got a few takeaways for you. I would say that leadership is central to sustaining creativity and innovation. I would say that innovation must be shared. It should not be driven by one person. It should be shared. Leadership must be inclusive, it must be responsive, and it must be future-focused. And we need to embed creativity in the school culture. Something that I want our listeners to ponder: how are you leading your innovation? And a couple of questions that you have, I want you to think about in my conclusion. What ideas resonate with your leadership context from what I've talked about? what tensions or opportunities do you see in our current education system? And how might you rethink leadership in your organization? As an academic, I've used a number of references that I have for you there. And just want to thank you very much for listening. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Professor George. So we have now completed the presentations for the first session of this webinar. And before we move to session 2, we have a few minutes to address the questions from the audience to our speakers. So we have a few questions that have already been submitted. So questions for Njideka. We are now facing major challenges from learning poverty to digital poverty in terms of the lack of justice and fairness in the access to technology. How can we create innovative policies to overcome these challenges? Njideka?
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Thanks for that. That's a great question. Because like I mentioned during my presentation, it's important for policy to lead. However, I also mentioned it's about kind of changing, a mind shift change where we are giving local people in these communities the power back, right? And so giving them their power back is anything from ensuring that we, whether it's the private sector, the government, foundations, that we are investing in leaders that are proximate to the solutions that we anticipate or the solutions that we're expecting these communities to create. And so it's important that that proximity is key because these individuals know what they know better than anyone else what the concrete realities are. And then by giving them their power back as we create these policies, we are ensuring 100% buy-in from these individuals that they are on board, right? They are on board with what they envision the change needed, the solutions that need to be innovated in their communities, in and for their communities are. So I think it starts with that kind of mind shift and cultural change where we are not transposing. This is not about digital or helicopter aid. This is about real grassroots investment in people that understand what the concrete realities are. And I think if we start that way, I think it's easier to inform policy and bridge the gaps.
Very well. Thank you very much. The next question I'd like to address to Professor George, and I'm going to read the question from the audience. If leaders are not supportive, we practitioners cannot be able to implement any creative solutions, including AI in education. So how can we convince school leaders? Or should this be through a policy set from systems above, like the ministry? What is your opinion, Professor George?
That's a very interesting question. I think it really should start from what I talked about, the leadership development. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I've been part of very many leadership development programs for both schools and higher education over the years, is that we need to tailor our educational leadership development programs to the needs of the current education system, and therefore I think we need more professional development opportunities for educational leaders. So that they can understand the need for creativity and innovation, and also to understand the need to work with people who are, I would say, at who are working with students on a daily basis, like teachers. And that is why in my presentation, I was really emphasizing the need for quiet leadership. And I was also emphasizing the need for soft leadership. And if you look at these two leadership practices, they put emphasis on leaders working with. So if we take school leaders in particular, school leaders working with students, working with teachers, and working with parents, so that they can achieve all this together. So I think we need to put more emphasis on leadership development programs so that this can happen. I don't think that policy alone can really change this. Policy in itself may not really change this. We need to have leaders because it's a mindset, and we really need to make sure that this mindset is changed. And policies alone cannot change the mindset.
Yes. And it was interesting to note that all three speakers in this first session of the webinar, you all mentioned professional development and teacher training as a central factor to being able to implement and develop students' creativity skills in schools and out of school. Now, as a quick follow-up question, Professor George, because you're at the School of Education, do you think that teacher preparation programs and educational leadership programs are doing enough to prepare future teachers and future leaders in developing students' creativity?
That's a big question, Professor Christina. But I think let me start with the leadership development programs. So leadership development programs at university level have changed over the years, and I think that they are a bit more practical than they used to be, and this is something that is positive from my end. I've seen this because I've been in these positions for a long time. I was the director of a program that was training a lot of school leaders at the University of Sydney in Australia for almost 16 years. So I saw a lot of change over the years, from focusing on theories of educational leadership to all this, to focusing on how you can manage schools practically. And I see that happening here as well at United Arab Emirates University. The programs have changed a lot. Now, when it comes to teacher training, there's been a lot of controversies about what teachers should learn and what they should learn, and whether we are preparing teachers for the future or and so there's been a lot of debate. But again, teacher training has gone through a lot of reforms. And I see the current teacher training program in a number of universities I've worked with are actually trying to move more towards creativity and more towards innovation. I can't say that it's totally been achieved yet, but I think they are slowly moving towards that.
Towards the right direction. Well, in the interest of time, I'd like to move on to the second part of this webinar, but there are plenty more questions from the audience, which we will pose to you at the end of the sessions. So please bear with us. Thank you very much for your presentations and for your contributions. So let's now move to our second session. There are two speakers in this session, which focuses on challenges and future pathways in creative education. Our first speaker is Professor Alejandro Paniagua from the University Oberta de Catalonia. Professor Alex holds a PhD in social anthropology from the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. He has taught in both compulsory and post-compulsory education and has undertaken research in the United Kingdom and the USA. Additionally, he has worked as a consultant for various international organizations, such as the OECD in Paris and the Brookings Institution in Washington. His research work focuses on educational inequality, teaching training, innovative practices, and the analysis of public policies. Professor Alex, it is our pleasure to welcome you to the webinar. We are looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Christina, and thank you to everybody who is listening. Needless to say, it's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to discuss a bit about not only creativity, but also innovation. While I'm doing this little introduction, I'm gonna share the presentation I prepared for you. So just give me, here we go. So, following the introduction, my intervention will be focusing more on innovation, not only on creativity. And I will be talking as a teacher. I think that we need to move from policies and to move from like big questions to try to understand better and to reflect on the realities most teachers face in their day-to-day experience in the classroom. That's why the title of my intervention is called Innovation and Creativity in Everyday Teaching. And I would like to start from the very end, just in case I run out of time. And I want you to be clear about the two main outtakes I would like you to keep it in mind. Some of these ideas have been like previously introduced from my colleagues, so maybe will be a bit redundant, but I hope that it will help you qualify and understand better the main ideas we are discussing here. The first idea that I want to highlight and is related to the title of this intervention, No More Waiting for Superwoman, Superman. Why that? Because I want to stress something that has been said, that innovation should not be acknowledged as something individual. We really need to approach innovation as a collective challenge or collective endeavor that is anchored in a change in skill cultures. And the second outtake I want to stress is that all we are saying about how children learn creativity and more generally how children learn, we can apply all those ideas to teachers themselves. So teachers, when we are talking about how to innovate, how to talk about creativity, we are talking about teacher learning, and most, if not all, the ideas we are putting here about helping students to become more creative, so to speak, also applies to teachers. So I think Mrs. Nideka mentioned that, among other things, that we do need to support teachers, and we do need not to see innovation and creativity from the point of view of consumers. We need teachers to take ownership about what they do. And I think also Stefan mentioned that innovation in itself is a source of professional development. I will be commenting also on that. So pretty fast, my intervention is divided into three parts. I will be talking about generally about why we are talking about creativity. But I think it's important to stress that we are talking today about creativity, but tomorrow maybe we are talking about socio-emotional skills.
Professor Alex,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Are you intending to show us your slides, your presentation slides? Because we can't see them. You're not sharing your presentation slides with us.
No? Okay. That's... sorry. Okay. Here we go now. It's okay now, I think?
Not yet.
Now I think it's okay.
Yes, and if you can put it on presentation
Yeah,
mode,
yeah,
please.
I got it there. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry for that. I wanted to move too fast, probably. Yeah. So what I was saying, I was talking about my presentation, number with the participant, just to stress that the collective dimension of innovation, and also to stress the support all teachers need to try to move forward within creativity and innovation. My presentation is divided into 3 parts. The first one is about introducing why we're talking now about creativity. The second part, we were talking about pedagogy, the importance of talking about innovative pedagogies, and try to define which are these. And then I want to finish with critical issues and challenges regarding to how to implement not only creativity teaching practices, but also the challenges. So I wanted to start with a report that was featured in 2018 by the World Bank. The World Bank, for the very first time, dedicated the World Development Report to education. They talk about there was a global learning crisis that all educational systems must address. This global crisis of learning, what it's saying is that we have worldwide more or less achieved, or we are achieving greater and greater rates of access to education systems, but it remains the quality of these teaching and learning processes, it remains a question mark. It remains, a challenge to improve the quality of each education, and even more difficult, the question of engagement. Maybe we have well-prepared teachers, but then there is the issue of engagement. The first thing the report talks about is no matter we talk about training and preparing teachers to become creative leaders in the classroom. Before that, we first need to have a critical mass of foundation for quality teaching. So to have teachers who are well prepared regarding pedagogical knowledge, content knowledge, inclusive practices, and the most important thing, to make sure that most of the part of the teaching of the classroom time is devoted to teaching. That it can sound contradictory, but it's one of the biggest challenges that a teacher faces when it's in the classroom. You can have an allocated instruction time, but then you need students to pay attention. So which means you have to excel in classroom management techniques, and then you need to prepare proper activities, and then these activities need to engage students in a proper way, and that's what's called actual learning time. So maybe you can have a lot of time allocated, but then the question is, of that time, what is the actual learning time? And here is where creativity and innovation comes in. When we talk about creativity and teaching, there are mostly two ways of understanding it. The first way, which is called teaching for creativity, is to think of activities that are directly connected to offering opportunities to be creative. So you can do your teaching in a normal way, but trying to use, for example, the rubrics that Stefan mentioned in the first intervention, but you don't need to change really your pedagogies, but you can use materials, so you can use projects that are directly focused on creating things, on working on creativity. Or you can talk about teaching creatively. That means that you innovate your approaches, and you offer room to make the teaching and learning process more interesting and effective, which is the way, I think, is the way to address the challenge of quality and engagement with the students. no matter if we use the first definition or the second one, the goal is to help students to learn creatively, not only to let them acquire new competencies, but also and foremost to make teaching and learning more attractive, more engaging, to motivate them and to create this classroom atmosphere that helps teachers improve their teaching. Therefore, I think Professor George mentioned that policy alone can do it, and that there are some dilemmas. And I would like to start and to finish the first part of this presentation mentioning the importance of approaching creativity in this idea of organic creativity. What means organic creativity? That there is no trade-off between curriculum or content and creativity, and that teachers shouldn't look at creativity and competence as something that if I teach creativity, then the content is lost. Creativity and content knowledge, they intersect each other, they reinforce each other. We can use, there are many models out there. This 5-dimensional model of creative thinking is one of the most used elsewhere. And the point here is, no matter what you teach, the content, mathematics, social sciences, no matter what you teach, there are competencies like exploring and investigating, making connections, using intuition that are part of that content. So content and competencies, they should be looked at as a dilemma. It should be looked at something that reinforce each other. So you need to pay attention to competencies such as creativity, but not only creativity, also critical thinking and so on. And it's not, it shouldn't be a dilemma. It should be something that connects to each other. The second part of my intervention, I would like to stress the importance of innovative pedagogies or teaching creatively, because nowadays there is quite a lot of stress and innovation in the national curriculums, and also more slowly maybe, but there are also more evaluation tools, but it remains a question to think of what happens within schools, to this idea of trying to go beyond the black box of schooling, what happens within schooling, and that means to focus on pedagogy. Some example comes from some studies that say, okay, if we take, for example, another model of creativity and education, the 4 C's, creativity, critical thinking, communication, collaboration. If you look at the first column, inclusion, you can see that what I said, many national curriculum reforms have increasingly included these creativity competences within the curriculum. But then if we look at identification of progression, there are less frequent mentions. And then when it comes to pedagogy, you can see that it's quite explicit that, so far, it's not explicit in curriculums and guidelines, and assessment is also deficitary. Why it's important to focus on pedagogy? Because if you as a teacher or in your school, if you take a look outside, you will easily find many innovative teaching practices, many models. Dr. Stefan mentioned the toolkit they created with rubrics, with lesson plans. There are many out there. And also we talk about theoretical models or learning principles like active pedagogies, like inclusive education. So the idea of pedagogy here, the idea what I'll be focusing on tries to bridge all these scattered practices, lesson plans, many approaches to try to offer teachers and schools a roadmap to help locate what they're doing or to identify approaches they would like to follow in order to implement these teaching practices we are talking about. Of course, I will be talking about the work I did with my colleague David Eastons when I was in the OECD about innovative pedagogies. I'm not claiming at all that you should follow our work. if you take a look, as I said, there are many very good and robust models and, and frameworks about pedagogical innovation. But what we tried to do here in this publication was to step back and try to help policymakers and teachers make sense of this landscape of innovations and innovative projects and new competences, to try to figure out where to start or how to connect with other experiences. In this report, we feature 6 clusters of innovative pedagogies. I'm not gonna go through one by one, but the important thing here is that this work try to organize innovation across different families and pedagogies. Make sure that, or be cautious that these labels I'm using, like blended learning, we used it in a very flexible way because we wanted to try to map all the innovation trends worldwide and just to organize them using six clusters of pedagogy. The first one is blended learning, computational thinking, focusing on problem solving, experiential learning, focusing on inquire. Maybe here for this discussion, embodied learning, in which we talk about the importance of the body and the emotions and creativity. Maybe this is the one for today, maybe will be the more relevant. We also talk about the idea of multilateralism and discussions-based teaching and gamification. Why I'm talking about all these models? As I said, because today we are talking about creativity, but tomorrow maybe we are talking about the importance of social and emotional skills or critical thinking on finance and education. So we do need to, as I said, step back, look at pedagogies in order to open up the way we understand teaching and learning and give room to work with competencies. Today, creativity, but others. Since today we are talking about creativity, I want to have a step in this cluster, embodied learning, that includes many different theoretical models. If you look at the left side, you can see that it's not only about creativity, it's about also discovery learning, social and emotional learning, health education. It's always connected. And on the other hand, we have more teaching practices, like more and more concrete, like, for example, school-based physical culture, physical education, or arts integrated learning, maker spaces, and then you go to, design thinking or like 3D modeling. Like, it's more and more concrete. So the idea of, for example, here, embodied learning is that help us to connect creativity with other theoretical models and with other discrete practices. So you can connect creativity competencies with other domains, with other practices that you might or not be implemented in your school. So the idea here is to combine, like, understanding pedagogy not as something theoretical and just reduced to, like here, to 6 models, but to combine them in different ways. For example, we were doing this report and we were talking with different school networks that they were introducing innovative practices. For example, when we were talking about robotics in Italy, we saw that we were able to use our model to explain any concrete teaching practice. For example, here we say, robotics, you can understand them as a combination of embodied learning, creativity and design, experiential learning, teamwork and inquire, or computational thinking, programming, when you are talking to robotics. And that can help you imagine you are doing, for example, robotics. It can help you move from the concrete practice to the pedagogical model and then look out there for other connection, other school practices, or other school experiences, or other practice, and help you move around different domains. When talking about innovative pedagogy, one of the most difficult barriers to overcome is, again, these dilemmas we mentioned before. There are these false dichotomies, like either you are innovative or you are not innovative. No, we like to link innovative pedagogies with something new, with active students, student-centered, and then make this false dichotomy about if you are not innovative and you use like a school, whole classroom teaching, that is something bad. While this dichotomy is false, because we are trying to talk about pedagogical problems, sometimes you are using something innovative, sometimes you are using something you are comfortable with, that you always do, and it's not about being like 100% innovative or not, but instead using those practices that you might think here and there can be useful. So it's not black and white. The same applies to creativity. It's not black, you are creative or not. It's more subtle, and there are a lot of gray areas here. I think talking about design principles, I think Dr. Stefan mentioned some of them. I would like to start with talking about innovation using this little I, because what I would like to stress when talking about innovation, because we talk about new practices, it can be new lesson plans, new rubrics that teachers are not familiar with. So we need to start, and I think Mrs. Nijeka, I think she mentioned that we need to start by local challenges. I mean, it's very important that teachers are not just consumers. Okay, you need to teach creativity. So I will give you rubrics, I will give you lesson plans. We need teachers to make sense of the local challenges, of the skill culture they are working in, and from that point, move on and rethink and gain individual skills. I think Dr. Stefan mentioned innovation is a source of professional development, and that's the way I would like to discuss innovation. Innovation can be something very big, transforming your school, but this is not the innovation I would like to stress. I mean, innovation can be also just an activity you feel comfortable with and you do in a particular time of your course year. It can be a project, it can be a subject. The most important thing is that the teachers feel confident, that they have a supportive environment. So no matter if you do just an activity, just a project, but it's important to see innovation as a learning process. So it's important that you feel confident and then move forward step by step. I'm not gonna stop here because I think these design elements, I think most of them, Dr. Stefan, he mentioned that, the importance of play and experimentation,
Professor Alex, yes, I think your time is up. If you would like to just say a few last words before we move on to our last presentation.
Okay. So let me just three important ideas. I think to help teachers improve the practices. I think we have to make a lot of effort with induction practices, because most of the teachers, they adapt to a school rather to implement what they learn from their training and experience is very important. And then it's important also to have schools that are collaborating, that are experimenting, so new teachers can start their career in appropriate environments. And also, we need to have more validated knowledge regarding innovative teaching, because nowadays we have just few studies that replicate what is been doing. And just the very last thing, just to finish. sorry, because I don't want to, is to stress that what we say at the very beginning, that we need to invest in teacher foundation on quality teaching before moving to creativity competencies. And I want to finish there. Thank you for listening. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor Alex. All very important, and all the roads lead again to quality teacher preparation. So without any delay, I'd like to move to the last presentation of today. And then we're going to have questions from the audience. So our final esteemed speaker today is Professor Kyung-won Seo from Seoul National University of Science and Technology in Korea. Professor Kyung-yong is an interdisciplinary researcher in the Department of Applied Artificial Intelligence. His expertise spans human-computer interaction, AI, and cognitive psychology, with a focus on developing human-centered AI to enhance user capabilities. So thank you, Professor Kyung-yong, for joining us today. We're all looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Christina, for the wonderful introduction. So, hello everyone, and thank you for still being here with me today, especially as the fifth and final speaker. You've made it through an kind of AI mini marathon, and I'll do my best to make this last lap worth your attention. So today, I want to share my ongoing research on a critical question: what happens when AI thinks for you, and how does it shape the future of students' creativity in the age of LLM? Well, as large language models like ChatGPT are increasingly integrated into education, we are witnessing exciting opportunities, but also some unexpected risks. At my lab, we've developed several AI-powered educational tools to explore these questions in real-world context. So, for example, you are now looking at some experimenting prototypes about AI writing assistant that supports essay composition, AI debate tutor that trains argumentation skills, or AI chatbot for stress assessment, or career counseling chatbot, like these things. Through this project, we've seen the tremendous potential of AI in education, but also a crucial insight, which is the way students engage with AI determines whether it enhances or diminishes their creativity. This realization led us to dig deeper through a series of research studies. The study examined how AI influences learner-instructor interaction in online learning. Well, we found that while AI can streamline communication and feedback, it also changes the nature of the relationship, sometimes reducing opportunities for meaningful connection with learner and instructor. And it also raises some following question about, can AI enrich learning without replacing what makes it human? Building on this, our next study focused on self-regulated learning by students. Well, we found that AI is most helpful when students take initiative. They set goals, ask questions, reflect on their progress. But when used passively, I mean using past AI experience, AI can actually reinforce dependency and reduce students' self-directed learning. In other words, the impact of AI depends on the student's mindset and cognitive engagement with AI experience. Finally, we also spoke directly with teachers in Korea and US. Our study explored K-12 teachers' perspectives on AI in the classroom. They told us they don't want AI to replace them. They want AI to support them in delivering personalized learning. They see AI as a tool to meet diverse needs, but only when it's ethically designed and used with care. Together, these three studies point to a shared conclusion. To foster student creativity, we must focus not only on what AI can do, but on how students use it and how we design it. So this goes to the background of this presentation. As large language models like ChatGPT and Bard, Claude rapidly enter the classroom, we are seeing a dramatic shift. When you look at the presentation slide, this headline sums it up very well. AI is getting very popular and fast. Students and teachers are experimenting with it in writing, tutoring, and even creative thinking tasks. However, well, there is still great potential, but do all students benefit equally and in the same way? Well, while many teachers recognize the educational benefits of LLMs, such as personalized learning and grammar support, they also express serious reservations, especially in K-12 settings. When you look at the recent data, teachers show that more than 70% of educators worried about what's happening under the surface. In particular, over-reliance on technology is a major issue. Students may skip the thinking process and go straight to the AI-generated answers. This leads to concerns about reduced critical thinking and even increased academic dishonesty, like cheating. So although LLMs open up new educational opportunities, they also bring significant challenges. And that brings us to a critical question. What kind of engagement are students actually having with AI? As these concerns grow, we are beginning to observe a deeper issue, what I call a creativity gap emerging from AI misuse. Recent editorials and opinions are warning us when students use AI tools to generate content with minimal effort, they may unintentionally reduce their own cognitive and creative development. Instead of learning how to think, reflect, and synthesize information, they risk becoming dependent on AI-generated responses, which is a very easy way and also very productive. But that's not just about cheating. It's about what they are not practicing: critical thinking, reasoning, and originality. So while AI can support some partial amount of creativity when misused, it may actually suppress it. The key takeaway here is this: the quality of student thinking is directly shaped by how they use it. This brings us to a key factor, cognitive engagement, specifically the difference between the active and passive use of AI. The risk of LLMs are not just about the technology itself, but about how deeply students engage with it. Take this real example. So students asking AI to generate a 300-word essay without contributing any of their own ideas. This kind of passive engagement, where students put in minimal effort or reflection, may save time in the short term, but it comes at the cost of deep thinking. Our research and others show that passive AI use can hinder metacognition and original thought, what we might call outsourcing the hard part of the thinking. Ultimately, this behavior doesn't just reduce effort, it can kill creativity. So if we want to protect and promote student creativity, we need to look beyond AI access and focus on the depth of student engagement. On the other hand, so I told you about the very grim story, but on the other hand, when students engage with AI actively and intentionally, we see very different outcomes. Here, students use chatbot not just to get answers, but to clarify their ideas, test arguments, and reflect on feedback. They bring purpose, critical thinking, and curiosity to the interaction. This is what I call active cognitive engagement with chatbot, and it has been shown to enhance creativity rather than replace it. As this article notes, generative AI is helping some students become more creative than ever. But again, the key is not the tool itself, it's how students use it. So our challenge as researchers and educators is this, I think. How do we guide students toward deeper and more reflective AI use? Based on our findings, I'd like to propose 3 key strategies to foster student creativity in the age of LLMs. The first, we need to capture students' cognitive engagement. This means identifying how students interact with AI, whether they are relying passively or engaging deeply, actively, so we can provide targeted support. Second, we must foster students' AI literacy. Students need to understand how these tools work, when to use them, and how to evaluate their output responsibly. Literacy empowers students to be critical users, not just passive consumers. Third, we need to develop ethical and education-focused LLMs. So just using private LLM is not enough. The design of AI systems matters, especially in classrooms. Chatbots should be built to guide, question, and support, not to simply provide answers to students. Together, these 3 pillars form a foundation for supporting student creativity in AI-enhanced learning environment. So let's go specifics. First, identifying passive engagement patterns in students. To better understand how students engage with LLMs, I conducted an in-depth study recently accepted to CHI 2025, where we analyzed students' behaviors with chatbot-assisted writing environment. We identified 4 distinct engagement goals that reflect different levels of effort. The first one is the most passive one, rely, where students ask the chatbot to write for them without much thought. The next one was search, where they look for examples or supporting details. When students' interaction with AI goes constructive and interactive, they use goals like operate and elaborate. Operate is about where students co-construct text by promoting the chatbot with their own input, and elaborate is where students use the chatbot to expand or deepen their thinking by debating or counter-argumenting with each other. Each of these maps to a different level of cognitive engagement, and as shown here, the rely pattern, which is passive, was the most common among students who lack self-regulated learning skills. This highlights an urgent need about we must be able to identify and support passive users before their creativity is totally lost. After identifying students' cognitive engagement, I also conducted another study to compare this with various factors. And what I found very interesting was a strong link between students' AI literacy and their engagement patterns. Well, students with high AI literacy, those who understand how AI works, know how to apply it appropriately, and can even critique or create some kind of the AI system, tended to pursue more cognitively demanding goals. They were more likely to operate or elaborate with AI chatbots, which means they used AI to build on their own thinking, some deeper thinking. On the other hand, students with low AI literacy often defaulted to simpler, more passive behaviors like search or rely on the AI. Just generate 300-word essay for me with this topic. This finding shows the importance of AI education. If we want to promote higher order thinking and creativity with AI, we must equip students with the knowledge and confidence to use AI critically and creatively. But simply, high AI literacy leads to deeper engagement, and deeper engagement fosters creativity. Last one, now that we've seen how AI literacy influences engagement, the next question is, how can we design better chatbots to foster creativity? So in this study, we analyzed chatbot responses and identified how different types of prompts the chatbot use and reply styles shape student thinking. For example, passive responses include simple tasks like read or observe, and these kind of interactions from chatbot don't push students to think. But when chatbots prompt students to compare or argue or elaborate with the chatbot itself, students starts to use some higher order thinking. So this table summarizes the alignment between engagement levels and the verbs commonly used in the chatbot responses. By intentionally designing chatbot prompts at a constructive and interactive levels, we can guide students toward more deeper cognitive processing. So on the right, you can see an excerpt from one of our chatbots used in a debate scenario. Instead of giving answers to the students, this chatbot asks follow-up questions to students and invites comparisons and pushes the student to think critically about the debate topic. So the design of the chatbot matters if we want AI to support creativity. The chatbot has to be built to challenge, not just simply assist students. So shaping the future of student creativity in the age of LLMs requires our intentional action, I think. Based on our research, we proposed 3 key areas that most guide both practice and policy. So first one is we need to capture students' cognitive engagement, not just whether they use AI, but how they use AI. This will allow for more personalized and nuanced, meaningful educational support for students in the age of LLMs. Second is we must foster students' AI literacy, giving them the knowledge, mindset, and some ethical, responsible foundation to use AI technology for their creativity. And the third one is we need to develop and refine LLMs specifically for safe educational use, models that are not just powerful, not just smart enough, but also pedagogically aligned. These priorities shape our lab's ongoing research agenda, where we are working to assess engagement in real time, build Gen AI literacy programs, and design AI systems that promote reflection, not just student automation. By focusing on these areas, I think we can assure that LLMs become a tool for expanding student creativity, not replacing or killing student creativity. To summarize, LLMs are transforming education, but to truly support student creativity, we need to think beyond access and focus on how students engage with AI. By capturing engagement patterns, building AI literacy, and designing ethical educational AI tools, I strongly believe that we can unlock AI's full potential as a partner in learning, not as a shortcut which hinders student creativity. And finally, I'd like to thank you so much for your time and attention. I know 20 minutes and 2 hours is a very long time to stay focused. I truly appreciate your engagement today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kyung-Yong. And Professor Alex, we now have, actually we had quite a lot of questions, but we have run out of time. Nevertheless, I would like to pose a couple of the questions that were asked by our audience. First to Dr. Kyung-Won. Dr. Jaman Al-Shahrani is asking, how can we combine the demands of the age of artificial intelligence, innovation, and creativity in a classroom crowded with students? So quite a practical question.
And which is a very hard question. Thank you for this question. I implemented the AI prototype that I showed you to the actual classroom settings like middle school or high schools. And it was really hard because when we think about infrastructures and students' AI literacy, and there's a lot of errors or technical hurdles. So I think it needs some time. And also, most of all, I think we need a very clear guideline. When I use AI with the university students, they still use it for cheating, and only a very few students use it for some active engagement. But when I use it with middle school students or high school students, they use it for fun. And I think this is a very natural phenomenon because using Gen AI is very fun. So I would like to recommend you to don't try to use it for a very practical reason for right now, but let them to experience it. Let them some time to build their own AI literacy. And after that, I think it will naturally help you to use it for a practical sessions like writing with AI or tutoring with AI and so on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And one more question, this time for Professor Alex. Nida Shahzad is asking, the big shift in AI is demanding us to create entirely new teaching systems because now knowledge is easily available. However, skills are at risk due to the overuse of technology or in some places not having resources for technology. So the question is, how to get a specific curriculum that supports the balance between knowledge and skills. And you, Professor Alex, refer to trying to combine both knowledge of content and those skills of creativity and innovation.
Thank you for the question. As I said, there is, I think, one of the main ideas, and if you look at any report, let's say the last PISA report, the volume 3 about creativity, or if you look at Mr. Stefan's work or any other report, I mean, one of the key ideas that I try to introduce through the concept of organic creativity is that we have been focusing a lot on the content and assessing the content and the knowledge, but regardless of whether we have done this or not, knowledge or content learning doesn't happen in a competence vacuum, and competence learning doesn't happen in a knowledge vacuum. I mean, regardless of what you do, even if you are not thinking about competences, you are teaching competences. And even if you try to focus a lot on AI or tools in this case, or any other tools, it always happens within a domain or the combination of domain. I want to put just a very fast vignette, a very fast example in our report. One of the clusters of the 6 clusters of innovative pedagogy is computational thinking. Most of the time I explain or I introduce the idea of computational thinking, people think of course, computers, right? Computers, of programs, or they think about coding or programming. And it's kind of fun to see that you can work with computational thinking skills and creativity within this cluster without using computers, because sometimes it's about trying to look at how to debug, how to solve a problem in different ways, or how to, for example, how to break down a huge problem into very small problems. That is the way of computation works. Try to break down big problems into a small one. So just to summarizing, I will say that it's not a trade-off. It's just to refocus on another dimension of the curriculum. But
Right.
you are always teaching competences and you are always teaching content. The thing is, what do you assess and what counts for you? That will be the intake.
Absolutely. We all agree on that. I wish we had more time to address more of our audience questions. There are plenty of them that have been submitted, but we have reached the end of today's webinar. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to all our distinguished speakers, our engaged audience, and especially Her Excellency Mahra Al-Moutawi and her team for making this event possible. So over the course of these 2 sessions we had today, we have explored the transformative power of creativity and innovation in education, from reimagining learning environments to leveraging technology and AI for future-ready skills. Dr. Stefan Vincent Lacron, at the beginning of today's webinar, set the stage with his insights on how policy and well-planned resources can drive educational innovation and promote creativity in schools, while Ms. Njideka Harry and Professor George Odiambo highlighted the critical roles of youth empowerment, leadership, equity, and teacher training in fostering a culture of creativity at schools. In our second session, Professor Alejandro Rodriguez and Professor Kyung-Won Seo challenged us to think critically about how to promote learning creatively, the critical role of pedagogical strategies in creating innovative learning environments, and the ethical integration of AI in education, a discussion that could not be more timely. Their perspectives remind us that while innovation opens doors to immense possibilities, it must be guided by inclusivity, pedagogy, and a deep understanding of human development and how learners learn. To our audience, your thoughtful questions and participation have enriched this dialogue, reinforcing the importance of collaboration across borders and across disciplines. The conversations we've had today are just the beginning. So let us carry these ideas forward, championing creativity in our classrooms, in the policies, in the communities that we belong to build education systems that inspire and equip learners for the complexities of today and tomorrow. So on behalf of the organizing team, thank you once again. May the connections and knowledge shared here today continue to spark action and innovation. Please stay curious, stay bold, and let's keep reimagining education together. Goodbye until next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.